prophet Zephaniah shouts out, "The King of Israel, the Lord, is in your midst. You shall fear disaster no more." You shall fear disaster no more. And then I hear, "Yet in thy dark streets shineth the everlasting light. The hopes and" what? "Fears of all the years are met in thee tonight." You know the tune. It's from that beloved Christmas carol, "O Little Town of Bethlehem." And what Christian doesn't cherish that image of eternal light shining from a ramshackle stable where the Christ child dozes in his mother's arms? Who doesn't celebrate the hope his birth brings to a world where hope is often, it seems, in short supply? But fear. What does fear have to do with Christmas? You have to know something about the setting of the writing of this Christmas carol. It was written by the famed preacher Philip Brooks. And the Civil War had ended only 3 years earlier. Sure, battle-weary veterans from both sides had laid down their arms and they had trudged home. But you have to know that half the nation still lay in ruins. President Andrew Johnson was doing his best to dismantle the rights that had been given to former slaves at such a terrible human cost. On the home front, both north and south, families had been decimated by the carnage of the most brutal war America had known. Wives and mothers counted themselves lucky if their husbands and their boys had come home lacking an arm or a leg or an eye, or shivering with PTSD. They knew that he could easily have not come home at all. In 1868, he gave Americans some comfort to picture the humble Bethlehem stable as a place where hope and fear met each other, and where hope emerges the ultimate victor. So what do people have to fear this Advent? Many are living in fears of imminent catastrophes, real or imagined. I hear talk of all the time about fear of where the nation's going, fear of where society's going, fear of where our schools are going. And it just goes on and on and on and on and on, the fears. Whether rich or poor, the refrain, "Ain't it awful?" pounds its way into our hearts and minds. I was reading about Advent and Christmas fear, some things the other day, and I read where one woman was living in fear before Christmas last year. She was freaking out about whether she forgot to get a gift for anyone she would be seeing on Christmas, whether she had adequate gifts for her co-workers, whether her children have an equal amount of presents to open, whether she messed up the name tags and gave the wrong gifts to her boys, whether the youngest would think Santa thought he was a bad boy this year. Now this woman was really worried whether her husband would like any of these gifts, and whether she had any money left over for those she forgot. Long before Brooks ever put pen to paper describing those silent stars floating over Bethlehem's deep and dreamless sleep, we still yearn for the abiding peace that is freedom from fear. John the Baptist, if you would read today's gospel lesson, in Luke 3:9, John the Baptist sets the alarmist tone in today's lesson. He says, even now the axe is being laid at the root of the trees, and every tree, therefore, that does not bear good fruit is cut down and thrown into the fire. John the Baptist was a fearsome image for me. Doesn't it make you cringe? Not bearing good fruit means that you will be cut down and thrown into the fire. Far from delivering comfort and consolation, John's prophecy is calculated to disturb. Yes, it's as much of a part of the church's Advent proclamation as the message of peace and comfort. Christians are used to looking at the Old Testament for prophetic condemnation and to the New Testament for consolation. This week they're reversed. The gospel message is tracking fear, while Zephaniah's passage sounds a note of triumph and hope. Hear it again. The King of Israel, the Lord, is in your midst. You shall fear disaster no more. Hear that? Fear? You shall fear disaster no more. Not that Zephaniah's prophecy is all sweetness and light, like his contemporary Jeremiah. Zephaniah, in the early chapters of his book, voices the message of an angry God. From the very beginning of Zephaniah, he says, God says, I will utterly sweep away everything from the face of the earth. I will sweep away humans and animals. I will sweep away the birds of the air and the fish of the sea. And he goes on and he continues. On that day, says the Lord, a cry will be heard from the fish gate, a wail from the second quarter, a loud crash from the hills. I will search Jerusalem with lamps. He'll take flashlights and search Jerusalem, and I will punish the people who rest complacently on their graves. Those who say in their hearts, the Lord will not do good, nor will he do harm. His words could be an indictment of our culture. How many of your neighbors respond to the gospel message with a shrug, saying, the Lord will not do good, but he won't do any harm either? Yet we do not vanquish fear by denying or avoiding it, folks. We need to admit that fear is as much a part of the Christmas story as peace and joy is. It helps to begin our Advent journey with a frank acknowledgement of our fears. For it's only moving through our fears to the joy that awaits us on the other side that we can truly grasp the triumph of good news of the Christ child coming into the world. There's more fear in the Christmas story than most of us care to be reminded of. It's unmistakably present in John's fiery preaching, of course, but we glimpse it as well in the angel's repeated greeting, do not be afraid. Remember? The angels come and they say to the shepherds, do not be afraid. Yes, they say do not be afraid, but the fact is that such an exhortation needs to be voiced at all is an admission that fear is an ever-present reality then and now. And you don't get that in the secular version of the coming holiday. You don't get that in the fun of wearing Christmas sweaters this morning. You don't get that. You see, for the secular holiday, it's all light and no shadow, all merriment and no malevolence. As for those who turn for a moment from the relentless Yuletide cheer to acknowledge some all too human problem or difficulty, they might be accused of lacking sufficient Christmas spirit. To admit you have some fears this time of the year, to admit there are dark places that are trying to overpower you, someone might look at you and say, well, you need to get in the Christmas spirit. Hear this. If you hear nothing else, hear this. God is no laughing Santa. God is no laughing Santa. Secular culture may be quick to domesticate God into a benevolent philanthropist, a kindly figure, very much like Santa Claus. But that's not the full biblical witness. You know, this may be a problematic thing to say, especially if you grew up like I did under some fire and brimstone type preachers, preaching a highly judgmental God. You know, some of us may be quite pleased to declare that we've grown beyond such a restricted image of God. Or God, such theological optimists claim is a God of love and peace, of empowerment and affirmation. Well, God sure is all of those things. But do we really want to discard the biblical understanding of God as a righteous judge? Do we really want to live in a world where there's no final judgment, no ultimate accounting for deeds of good or evil? You see, we don't get the Christmas joy by detouring around fear. We get there only by allowing the hopes and the fears of all our years to be met in that little town of Bethlehem. We only get there by allowing the hopes and the fears of all of our years to be met in that state in Bethlehem. Who would advance such a crazy idea that seems so out of step with popular culture? A Christian, that's who. A Christian who believes God's promises and knows them to be true. Hey folks, in this life there are things to be feared. There is. There are things to be feared in this life, and there's no doubt about it. If we didn't fear the worst outcomes of human life, we'd be considered foolish. Yet both Zephaniah and John are telling us good news. They're telling us that all of these fears of ours are ultimately as nothing laid up against the great plans God has for the world and all who dwell therein. That might be easy. Some folks think that might be easy for you to say, preacher, you're not facing this or that or whatever. I may not be. But ultimately, God says through Zephaniah, don't fear. Do not fear. Into human life, some fears must intrude. There are indeed times when thick darkness surrounds us, and we justifiably wonder if we'll ever see daylight again. Yet, even in times of loneliness and despair, we aren't alone. There is one who waits beside us to watch over us and to protect us. This is the prime message of that glorious season for which we're prepared. The heart of Christmas is the theological doctrine known as the Incarnation. The Gospel writer John puts it this way, and many of you know. the Word became flesh and lived among us. And we've seen His glory. The good news of this bright season is not that we have nothing to fear in this life, but rather that our fearsome and powerful God has the ability to bring us through every lesser fear that may assail us. Oh, little town of Bethlehem. It's true. The hopes and fears of all our years are met in thee tonight. In a matter of days, we'll gather to celebrate the good news of the Messiah's birth. Next Sunday, instead of hearing me babble, you'll see the children's pageant. It's joyous. Bring your kids. I told you, bring the neighbors' kids. Bring your phones. Take pictures. We'll celebrate. And then the following evening at 6 o'clock is our Christmas Eve service, where we celebrate the good news of the Messiah's birth. May we discover anew, in these days of expectation, that when hope meets fear, in Jesus Christ, the lesser fears of this life are vanquished. The only one we need to fear is God. Proverbs says this: the fear of God, quoted as respect of God, however you want to translate it. The fear of God is the beginning of wisdom.